What's up? What's happening? I have no idea what we're going to talk about. Like, I just literally don't know.
Okay. I saw that yesterday you won a cooking competition. Is that what's next?
No, I will not be. I will not be taking my talents to the cooking sector. I thought personally that because I watch hours and hours and hours of MasterChef. I thought that it was going to be super easy and that I was going to be able to bake something with ease, and I was wrong. So that's not in my future. But I did win yesterday. Yes, I did win in a cake baking competition.
Well, congrats on that. We were very excited for you.
Thank you.
Want to talk to you a bit about like new media versus old media.
Okay, perfect.
And I was enjoying listening to your show the other day, and it occurred to me, like, what do you think the sort of the legacy media outlets, CNN, New York Times, Washington Post, infinitely superior Rolling Stone, like, what's one story that you think they have exactly backwards, and how would you like them to fix that?
That's a great question. With respect to how legacy media operates and how independent media operates, I would say, like, I can't speak on specific stories, but what I can say is that legacy media severely lacks the human component, like the personality component. It's too manufactured, it's too manicured, and I do think that plays a role in legacy media not being as appealing to the younger demographic. On top of that, though, if we're going to talk about like individual stories, I think a coverage of Palestinian rights, Stephen Donziger, who was recently allowed to leave the house arrest that he was subjected to by civil court for successfully defeating Exxon. I think it was Exxon. I always miss it up, Exxon or Chevron. But that rarely got coverage in legacy media. It was Chevron. I said Exxon, but it was Chevron. And things that honestly routinely go against the established order, like things that criticize capital, labor rights, the labor union momentum that we're seeing all around the country. I feel like that doesn't get a lot of press coverage. It's changing right now, but I do believe that legacy media, for the most part, is like trailing behind.
Okay, so you look at legacy media. What do you see and think, like, okay, that piece of that I can take from that, I can build on that. Like, there's some virtue there. What do you see as some of the upsides of it?
What are the upsides of legacy media? Journalism, like being able
having
the funds, to be able to send people all around the world and actually doing actually doing the news, actually doing journalism. Because like I'm an idiot and I'm very honest, but I am very limited in what I can do as far as like actually being able to like break news, right? I can't scoop anyone. I'm only one person. I'm a one-person operation. I can do commentary, but I'm not actually, reporting on anything. I'm not ever reporting on anything new. And that is still something that is incredibly important. And that is what I would say legacy publishers do best.
When you've been doing your show, are there moments where you're like, okay, I'm giving this commentary. Where can I go deeper? Like, where can I find out more? Because you have this voice and you have this big audience, and within the commentary, is there room to grow? Is there room for more interviews?
Certainly. I mean, there's plenty more that I can do, but I'm limited by being one person, and I'm also limited by because I'm limited by time constraints as well. You know what I mean? I'm like preparing for whatever kind of news coverage I'm going to do for the day. And there's only so many hours in the day for me to be able to do that, and then also live stream for 8 to 10 hours a day, which is what I do. So that there's definitely things that I could do more of, like some interviews and whatnot. But I mean, I try to set up like cool and unique and interesting interviews. But like I said, I don't have a booker or anything, so it's
that like it was a 17-minute video the other day. I like that. I thought that was sharp, and I like that format. It felt like you sort of drilled down, concentrated a bit.
Oh, you're talking about whiteness does not exist, the video
Yeah.
on my YouTube, I think, or no, what was it? White people do not exist. Yeah, so that's what I used to do when I was at the Young Turks. Before I started on Twitch and before I went on my own, I created a show called The Breakdown on the Young Turks where I scripted out my commentary ahead of time. I was also really bad off the cuff on camera. Part of the reason why I actually joined Twitch to begin with was so that I could get better at speaking off the cuff and speaking my mind. I was a decent writer. But I would script out everything and I would do a lot of research ahead of time and like script it basically ahead of time and then read it from a teleprompter. That was what was the White People Do Not Exist video was not scripted. It was off the cuff. I was just responding to a chatter, but I think it came across similar to like my older videos.
When you started doing Twitch, was there a moment where you're like, okay, this could be the thing? Like this is going to take me places?
Never to the degree of success that I experienced on the platform. I think that was shocking for me and shocking for everyone else. If I'm being honest, I thought that it was going to be a place where I could, like, I was looking for a place where I could have my own community. I did not want to be under the umbrella of the Young Turks. I wanted my own properties. I wanted, exercise my own creativity without any sort of constraints from a larger company. And I always wanted to be able to have like a little community on Twitch for myself with like-minded individuals, but like it blew up way past what I ever would have imagined.
I was thinking about this earlier. I was watching your stream and I was realizing, wow, like 8 hours a day. Do you ever get anxious about being wrong? Like, do you ever think like, oh shit, I'm gonna look back on that and be like, oh, that one hurt?
Yeah, no, all the time. And I do get things wrong sometimes. I mean, it's normal. A lot of people get things wrong. It's only human, especially when I'm covering news for 8 hours a day. One of the most famous examples of this is when my analysis was correct, but my prediction was wrong when I thought that Russia would not be stupid enough to actually invade Ukraine. And I was pretty adamant about not listening to the State Department on that issue, given all of the prior examples of the State Department straight up lying about things, and that I mean, I wasn't alone in that assessment. The main reason why I did not want to believe the State Department personally was because I was listening to Ukrainian authorities on the matter, and they themselves also did not think that Russia was going to invade Ukraine until they did, and that was a big deal for a lot of people on the internet who were very upset with the way I mistreated them, I guess, leading up to that moment. There was also a little bit more, anxiety and anger, considering that it's like you're taking a position where like America is not immediately the villain in the story, and it seems like you're making America to be the villain in the story. Any kind of anti-imperialist rhetoric is going to be met with a lot of anger and frustration from even leftist and progressive audiences, because American exceptionalism and American foreign policy is just the norm. It's the hegemonic attitude, and we're all living in the imperial core. So people were very frustrated with that. But I immediately admitted, even before other sources were calling it an invasion, that I was wrong and that Russia was invading Ukraine. While that probably affects like the way some people see my coverage, and I'm sure it has. Ultimately, I tell people all the time, like, sometimes I'm going to get stuff wrong, but I'm always going to be honest with you. I'm always going to tell you what my biases are. Personally, I'm not going to hide that, and I never have. And I'm going to tell you if I'm wrong. I will correct myself.
When people come to your show for the first time, what do you hope that they get out of it? And what do you hope that, like, if they come back like a week, a month later, like, how do you hope that changes their news consumption experience?
How do I hope like people's news consumption experiences changes when I get something wrong? Is that what you're saying?
No. I'm saying when people come to your show for the first time, like, what do you hope that they get out of it? And then if they stay for a month, like, what do you hope you've helped them understand in a way that they might not have?
I believe I have a position that is not necessarily discussed openly in many circles, including even like, college and certainly not in media. But it is actually widely shared by people. They just have never communicated their desires from an ideological perspective. What I mean by that is that I am a leftist. I believe in socialism. I believe in a different way of organizing the economy. And I think that a lot of people, if you were to talk to a lot of people about the actual realities of like Marxism or a Marxist or a socialist organization of the economy, they are going to be way more susceptible to agreeing with you as long as you don't use those words, which I rarely ever do. I don't normally say like I'm a socialist. I rarely ever come out and say it. I rarely say anything beyond I'm a leftist. And the reason for that is because of centuries of Red Scare propaganda and the demonstrable failure of like prior socialist, or not socialist, but like at least countries that have tried to counter the capitalist hegemonic organization have lost. They've demonstrably failed, and because of that, it's impossible to come out and be like, I'm a socialist. You know what I mean?
You're a socialist. That's a broad swath of ideology that can fit in that. I mean, that's everything from like Denmark to Venezuela or the Soviet Union.
No,
Do you
I don't think Denmark is socialist. I think Denmark is I think European Nordic social democracies are still capitalist. They will recognize that they're capitalist. They're social democracies. Even Venezuela itself, or all these other countries have like attempted to transition into socialism. China claims that it's currently in a transitional state of socialism, but
I mean,
there
the
it's just
opposite at the
what's up?
moment. Like if you look at the sweep of China, it is 50 years of telling you that they're transitioning towards socialism while simultaneously liberating the market and funneling money upward.
I wouldn't necessarily say they're funneling money upwards, but I think that their infrastructure expenditure is pretty solid. I mean, they've been able to urbanize pretty effectively. I think that is a socialization. There's an aspect of socialization similar to, or rather, not dissimilar to Nordic style social democracies. But of course, they're not like still there's still private ownership, and it's not like China is famous for its like worker organized worker councils or their worker organized like governance. It's not the case, but they do some cool stuff with billionaires every now and then when they make them not billionaires.
Yeah, I was listening to your take on baby food poisoning and how China handled it when they had the melamine in the milk versus sort of the current approach.
Yeah,
Um,
I think like America loves executing mentally ill black people in places like Texas and Florida. They love it. They literally get off on it. It must be a kink or something because there's no reason for it. Instead of that, maybe we should actually, if we're going to have capital punishment, why not use it on people in actual positions of power?
so this is a question I had about you because one thing I've noticed is like you lay it on the line, you don't mince words. But sometimes I think one thing that's hard for people who don't watch a lot of Twitch or have never been in like the World of Warcraft general chat is they struggle to gauge what's a bit, what's literal, what's like like a figurative thing. Like if they were to come down and figure out that someone through negligence had killed infants via poisoned baby formula, capital punishment.
No, I'm anti-capital punishment. I'm joking. No, no, of course not. Obviously, I'm not a believer in capital punishment. When the subject matter comes up and I'm talking about it seriously, you'll know what my position is, and I am, of course, anti-capital punishment. I think it's gross. It's disgusting, and I do think that America is trailing behind the rest of the world. Surprise, surprise. I think our entire carceral system is just absolutely awful and dehumanizing. There's a reason why Norway considers it to be a human rights abuse to send prisoners to America, and they refuse to do so because it is horribly dehumanizing. It's one of the worst and one of the most like unchangeable aspects of American society. It's our draconian attitude that revolve around crime and punishment. Like we think that the state should execute people, and that our criminal justice system slants towards vengeance rather than actual justice.
Okay, if you were gifted magic powers, what do you think like the first like 3 steps would be towards fixing that?
3 steps towards fixing our prison system.
Yeah, I mean,
That's an
like in
incredibly complicated structure, but I would try to tackle crime as it manifests, as in I would try to solve the underlying material inequalities that is, at least historically and in contemporary society, why violent crime occurs. And you can't do that without, you can't actually solve crime without solving the underlying material reasons for why violent crime manifests. So I would try to work on that, the inequality in underserved neighborhoods. I mean, beyond that, I don't know. I would try to, with my magic wand, change the attitude that Americans have, that where they believe that they have a vindictive approach. I would try to get them to believe in rehabilitation over incarceration.
So stepping out of the realm of magic wands, that's probably a dumb frame. Say it's like 2100 and things in America have worked out well. Why do you
if we're
think
talking
that?
about tangible legislation, I can actually give you a way better answer on that. One of the main things that we need to immediately do is see prisoners as human beings rather than the dehumanized attitude that we have for the incarcerated. Prisoners' rights is a big way to do that. Prisoners should be able to vote, for example. That's number one. If they're able to vote, they're now a constituency. They're now able to be heard. And I think that that would go a long way in basically starting the conversation around solving some of the issues immediately at hand in the way that prisoners is the unjustifiable conditions that prisoners are subjected to in this country. So that's definitely one area that I would focus on legislation wise.
One thing that's hard for me, because when I started in politics, I was covering climate, and that was 14 years ago. And at the time, people said like, "Okay, this is it. This is our last chance. We got to do something about climate, and if we don't, we're in trouble." And of course, we didn't do anything.
Good thing we solved it.
Yep, it's my favorite Onion headline ever. Is whatever happened to climate change? And then now we're back there. It's 12 years. 2020 was 12 years after like our last climate push. We're not going to do it again. It's pretty clear, barring some miracle, like the big climate package is dead.
Mhm.
How do you stay hopeful? And if so, how?
Do I stay hopeful?
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't say I'm a very hopeful
In a
person.
world that's so different from the one that we're living in, and that's obviously like a big focus. Do you ever see in your lifetime us getting there, getting close to there?
A solution to climate change?
More
No.
broadly, like a world that aligns more closely with the kind of things you talk about in your show, I was wanting to see.
Hey, who knows? There are decades where nothing happens, and there are weeks where decades happen, right? I can't speak on that. I personally do not know. I can only contribute to that as best as I can by urging others to organize their workplaces and mobilize politically in every way they can, no matter how marginal or fractional it feels. I think that is something that I push for and that we should continue pushing for, because there's nothing else you can do. You can only try to work and build the foundations of a better tomorrow for future generations, because this kind of change, especially when you're going up against like centuries of solidified capitalist dogma, it's going to be really difficult. It's going to, in many instances, is going to feel like your change is not happening. It's not going to even feel like it's gradually happening. But you just keep going. If you believe in justice, you just have to keep going, no matter what.
My mom was in Washington last week, 2 weeks ago, whenever the decision came down, and we happened to be walking by the Supreme Court, and she noticed people who were about her age. Sorry, Mom. When Roe passed, and she had this moment where she was like, "This 50 years, this 50-year struggle, and it looks like we're going to turn back." But then she got to talking with some of them, and she realized that on the other side, that also means that after 50 years, there's still people in it, and there's still people who haven't given up on that fight. And that was like a poignant moment for me when I was getting a little mopey about climate change and things that I care about, including reproductive rights.
Yeah, I mean, I think that hyper focusing on wedge issues such as abortion rights, when it is basically established that 70% of the country has, since the decision on Roe v. Wade, virtually an agreement. Like, there's a supermajority agreement on this issue. The only reason why it's something that people are talking about is because it's a wedge issue that the Republican Party utilizes to mobilize a very active voter base of evangelicals, right? This and like school segregation, pro-segregation for schools, of course, is the two key, is like the two political things that have historically mobilized evangelicals. The only reason why we ever, in my opinion, discuss this as a back and forth and not like established law of the land is because the Democratic Party is feckless and inept and is unable to actually offer a progressive agenda that they run on oftentimes, so that the Republicans can react to that progressive agenda. So Republicans look for different ways of making themselves seem different than the Democratic Party, when on a lot of issues, they are perfectly aligned. Oftentimes deregulation, maybe the Democrats are at a slower pace when it comes to deregulation or play the defensive role against deregulation, but the Republicans are very effective at dismantling federal agencies. They're very effective at dismantling regulation. They're very effective at sidestepping the legislative branch and hyper focusing on court packing, which they've done so well, including all the way up to the Supreme Court, and utilizing state legislatures that are gerrymandered. So even if you have a 10-point difference, like in a state of Wisconsin, Republicans will still maintain state supermajorities at the state legislature. They've completely changed, slowly but surely, through many, many years, the entire system. And it's easy for them to do so because their ideology aligns perfectly with capitalism. It's much easier to starve the beast, and it's much easier to take a anti-government approach when that approach also is fundamentally positive for the corporate bottom line. Deregulation is great for corporations. It improves profit margins. So that's why they're very successful. And that's why they have to find different issues that they can hyper focus on so that they can continue mobilizing their base of voters.
When you say the Democratic Party is feckless, do you see that as a question of like the individual people at the head of it or something more structural?
I mean, structurally, yes, absolutely. I think that the people are just the Democratic Party's like leadership is yes, they're cowards, but also I guess they're just operating on their own on their own interests. They're not actually. I don't think they're motivated by empathy in the way that they present themselves. There are a lot of NGOs that might or there are a lot of great people working in activist circles and whatnot, but ultimately I think the Democratic Party itself is not operating out of a place of consciousness or being considerate to marginalized people. I think it's just that's their position. That's the song and dance that they play. And this bears itself out in the lack of momentum that they put behind actual legislation. When it comes down to it, Obama had a filibuster-proof Supreme Court. I mean, not Supreme Court, sorry. Obama had a filibuster-proof Senate, and he didn't codify Roe v. Wade. Throughout the past 50 years, the Democratic Party had, I think, 11 or 12 instances where they had a supermajority where they could have actually codified Roe v. Wade, and that was out of the question. That I think is a that's a.
On the particulars of that, when in like the 2009 supermajority or the 2009 when they had the filibuster, that wasn't 60 Democrats who would vote to codify Roe v. Wade. I mean, it was a different party back then. Like 12 years ago, it was a way different party on social issues.
I don't disagree with you, but I do think that that is built into the Democratic Party's. That's built into the Democratic Party is that there's always going to be a rotating villain. There's going to be a Joe Lieberman, or there's going to be someone else who is a spoiler. If it wasn't for Joe Manchin now or Kristen Sinema now, it would be Maggie Hassan or numerous other senators, or even I think a group of centrist congresspersons could actually build a coalition and dismantle build a coalition and basically dismantle whatever legislative agenda item that the Democratic Party has that Obama ran on. So I do see that. I think the lack of opposition to internal disagreements and not properly whipping votes in favor of your legislative agenda is because the Democrats are comfortable playing the role of like people who are safeguarding our institutions and defending against the accelerationist fascist Republican Party. They just sit back and take the wedge issues as a gift delivered to them. And I think the Roe v. Wade example is perfect for that. Their failure over the course of the past 50 years is coming back in a way where they can use that now to try to mobilize their base in the midterms when Joe Biden is deeply unpopular in the country.
Do you see a tension, when you talk about the two-party system and the huge overlap between the parties? I hear the nuance. Do you worry that what some people hear is like, well, it's all the same, don't vote, it's hopeless, who gives a shit?
I'm sure that regardless of what I have to say, that the plurality of voters or voter eligible, the plurality of the voter eligible population already feels that way. Now, what we have to ask ourselves is Hasan Piker, a Twitch streamer who gained a little bit of a fraction of prominence over the course of the past couple of years, responsible in any meaningful capacity with the voter base not being interested in voting for either party? Or do we think that it's nearly decades and decades of ineptitude from the Democratic Party and decades of horrible agenda items from the Republican Party that effectively dismantles the state and harms marginalized people, that is pushing the working poor away from voting because they feel as though neither party represents their interests at all. And in a lot of instances, they don't even have the time to vote. That is also by design, as you know. It's just not even that easy to vote in many circumstances. You might be a felon, and like in the state of Florida, you might actually have the entire state pretty much by wider margins agree that you should be able to vote, and then Ron DeSantis can come in, even though he defeated his competition by like a very slim margin. He can effectively say the 1.5 million ex-cons that now are eligible to vote, because that's how democracy works, will still not be able to vote, and will subject them to a poll tax. All of those things happened.
If this is an issue you're familiar with, it's one to read up on. Sorry, just talking to the people. It's a couple years ago, it seen as this like really hopeful thing, this moment where Florida got together and decided that a felony should not disenfranchise you from democracy. There was a lot of hope around it. It was seen as like a model for going forward. And in the years since, it's just been rolled back repeatedly in the most like sinister of ways. It has more than like a slight resemblance to things that were done in the Deep South in Reconstruction, and then again during the Civil Rights Movement.
Absolutely.
But to go back to the earlier question, of course, one Twitch streamer, popular though he is not responsible for the vast majority of people sitting out.
Yeah.
But we only have the lives we have. We only have the window we have. And within the window that you have, how do you walk that line between pointing out similarities between the parties without giving the impression that not voting, that there's not a substantive difference between sitting out an election and voting in one?
Well, I mean, my community does not sit out elections. I literally door knocked for Bernie Sanders, urged people, and used our gigantic Discord server to continue getting people to go out and engage in get out the vote initiatives, because ultimately, as much as I hate to admit this, I guess I don't, but I mean, Noam Chomsky is correct that it is still the harm reduction position to still vote for the Democratic Party, but that's not going to stop me from openly stating that like they are not doing a good job. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I wouldn't. And
I think that if the Democratic Party wanted people to be engaged and like genuinely enthusiastic about getting out to vote for them, they would actually at least do something. Like they would do something that makes the voter base feel protected, makes the voter base feel like the Democratic Party's got their back. When they don't do that, and they allow spoilers within their ranks to destroy their legislative agenda, and then they hyper-focus their initiative and efforts on like actually popular, maybe they're in safe blue districts, but still very popular progressive voices within the party. Like Kyrsten Sinema got an incredible W in that bipartisan infrastructure bill as a Green senator, right? She's new. Why did she get that? And then she still turned around and used that prominence that the Democratic Party gave her to destroy Joe Biden's agenda. The actual Build Back Better agenda was effectively dismantled by Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, the two people that the Democratic Party foolishly offered this incredible benefit of like putting their name on legislature that passed through Congress.
Yeah, I don't think in Trump's Republican Party, someone who bucked Trump's main position wouldn't get the top-ranking committee seat on the issue in question. But Joe Manchin is the chairman of the Energy Committee.
Oh yeah, Joe Manchin should be sitting on a chair, but I don't know what kind of chair we're talking about. I'll just say this much: I'm not going to say anything that is going to compromise your position as at Rolling Stones. But all I'll say is this: okay, when Madison Cawthorn came out and said like to impress some Warrior Poet Society podcast host that he was invited to cocaine orgies or whatever, Kevin McCarthy pulled him aside and may or may not have beat the shit out of him, okay? He looked like he got beaten. He was crying so hard that his face was swollen and red when he got out of Kevin McCarthy's room. Then the Republican Party immediately primaried him, like immediately. Certainly, there was some Never Trump Republicans in that pack that was attacking Madison Cawthorn, but they very quickly punished him, okay? Even before that, they very quickly reprimanded him and punished him for even saying such a thing. You never see this same level of engagement from the Democratic Party when it comes down to whipping votes. You don't see it when it comes down to dismantling bullshit hurdles that they themselves abide by, like the Senate parliamentarian deciding that the $15 minimum wage cannot be in the budget reconciliation. Except, time and time again, the Republican Party has effectively overrode the Senate parliamentarian when it suits their agenda. They did that back in the day time and time again. They even went so far as to fire a Senate parliamentarian and put one in a position, a new Senate parliamentarian that complied with the wishes of the Republican Party. Democrats never do this. Now, at a certain point, you have to stop and think, perhaps the Democratic Party isn't doing this because it's not in their best interest to do this. Perhaps the Democratic Party isn't, genuinely interested in pushing for a $15 minimum wage. Perhaps they're not interested in genuinely codifying Roe v. Wade because they also see it as a good political tool to mobilize their base. But I think that demonstrably, while there are more Democrats in this country, and demonstrably, while there are more incredibly progressive opinions, if you pick apart those wedge issues and look at the popular support for them, you would recognize that, these are issues that most Americans agree on. The Democratic Party keeps somehow losing elections. How is that even possible? Maybe it's because of the apathy that people feel when they see time and time again a bunch of millionaires caping for billionaires and corporations in this country and refusing to do even a crumb to actually defend their voter base beyond simply like Walmart or like Nike or all these other companies throw up a fist and say Black Lives Matter and then refuse to push for any kind of initiative that the streets demand or demanded, rather. A great example of this was when Donald Trump was in power, obviously, when the George Floyd protests were happening, the Democratic Party said their first an immediate reaction to the defund the police movement, which of course not a single Democrat is going to go out to bat and say it, right? Because it was unpopular in the media because no one really understood it or defended it. What did they do? They immediately found a much more sanitized, policy-driven counter to that. They came to the table with concessions to the opposing party. They wanted to push for 8 can't wait. That was their initiative, right? We can't take money away from police budgets that are inflated and never ending and expanding year over year, and then put it into some social safety nets or put it into hiring actual counselors or whatnot. You know what I mean? People social workers that would actually deal with like half the things that cops shouldn't be dealing with. Instead of doing that, they were like, no, we're just going to push for federal legislation or things that already exist, like a choke ban. That was one of the things in 8 Can't Wait. When Democrats actually came to a position of power, what did they do? They ran on police. They basically ran on funding the police more, but also reforming the police, which is something that they've been saying for many, many years. And then immediately, 8 Can't Wait didn't even pass. They didn't have the votes for it. They didn't whip hard enough for those votes. Like I said, I mean, they just don't. Like the Republican Party would never let go of real, genuine momentum happening in their base. They do it for their 30% evangelical support. That's why Roe v. Wade is done, and they'll do whatever it takes to push for legislation that is in their agenda, no matter how cruel and unjustifiable said legislative agenda item is. Because they're ride or die. They're ride or die for their base.
We were talking about this earlier. Do you you got takes, you got ideas, you clearly have convictions. Do you ever think about running? What would it take to get you to run?
I would never run.
Never ever?
No shot. Because, well, first of all, I am an imperfect vessel. I can urge other people to do so, but I myself would be a terrible candidate. I'm hot-headed. I speak out on my convictions too much, and also my most famous moments are saying things like America deserved 9/11 and numerous other things that would immediately there's so much to use against me in opposition research by literally taking clips out of context. You could just destroy me. I'm not popular enough to overcome that, nor would I ever be able to get a base of support to give enough money and enough good-natured coverage in the media to overcome that, because I would be effectively primarying probably like a blue dog Democrat or something, and the Democratic Party would destroy me. The establishment Democrats would come after me and
because
push
you brought
my
it
skull
up.
in.
Because you brought it up. Do you regret saying that about 9/11?
No.
Do you want to explain for an audience that is meeting you for the first time?
Yeah.
Do you want to explain? You said it was a nuance. What are those nuances?
I feel incredibly vindicated for obvious reasons, considering that in the 20th anniversary of 9/11, every single thing that I was talking about when I said what I said was made into documentaries, basically, or people were working on those documentaries for years, I guess. But all those documentaries that came out after 9/11 was like, yeah, oh yeah, we kind of did do this to ourselves, which is precisely what my point was. It's the backlash, or the blowback rather, if you want to use the real term for it, of our meddling in the affairs of the Middle East for half a century. And it's true. Like, I mean, this is not even something that people discuss in academia. What's up?
I mean, you understand how that, like, there were kids in those buildings. Like, surely they didn't deserve it.
No, of course not. But that was never my position. I don't believe the Americans that died on 9/11 deserve to die. Of course not. What I was simply talking about is American foreign policy, and also, lack of intra-agency communication, the fact that, assets that we knew of and were monitoring were, literally planning this under the noses of the CIA and FBI. All of that paired up with, half a century of meddling and literally propping up the same people that ended up striking the towers is it's our fault. It's the American government's fault.
Yeah, I think when you frame it that way, there's a discussion to be had, and there's like a compelling reasons. Do you worry about getting just captured in sound bites?
I mean, I think it's going to happen no matter what. People that don't want to see what I am actually saying, or people that don't want to be charitable to what I have to say, are not going to be charitable. They're going to use everything they can to disparage me. And they do, but ultimately I'm live for 10 hours a day. It's pretty hard to, if you do care, if you do legitimately want to hear what I have to say, it's not that hard. You can reach me, and I will talk about it endlessly, about things I believe in endlessly.
All right, I don't want Ian to miss his train, and we're creeping up on time, but last few questions. Do you have a dream guest, someone you'd love to have on who you haven't had yet?
Yeah, Dua Lipa. That's my dream guest.
How's that going?
It's not going well. I keep DMing her. I'm like, Dua, please come on my stream. I love you. And she just does not respond. She's ghosting.
We'll hit her. We have some connections.
No, I mean, all joking aside, no, I love that she puts herself out there when it comes to speaking out about political positions that she holds, that the majority certainly is not too fond of. And I really respect that. I love when rich people basically put their wealth on the line, or their famous people put their charitability, I guess, on the line to speak out for marginalized people that otherwise would never be heard.
And in 10 years, if your life is going well, what do you see yourself doing?
I mean, I love doing this. I love streaming. So people always are like, "Oh, what else is next? What's next for you? What do you want to do? Do you want to get, do you want to get it like a mainstream media contract or something?" Like, I've had opportunities to move over to mainstream media, but I don't like that. I like this. So 10 years down the line, what do I see myself doing? Probably this, hopefully at a much, much larger scale. I would like to be able to do what I'm doing right now to 1 million people at the same time, rather than the 30,000 or 200,000 when it's the election, when it's election coverage time.
Well, if that's still going on, hopefully 10 years from now we can have you back.
All right, don't wait for 10 years. You can have me on before then.
Yeah, I really appreciate all the time you take and the thought you put in these answers. Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for asking me to come on. This was great.
I appreciate you.
All right.
Cool.
Bye, guys.
All right, bye.
Okay, that was the Rolling Stone magazine. That was a little awkward. I hope that it was good. I hope you guys appreciated that. I think I was being a little fucking annoying, but I hate when I think I get too serious.